Subscribe for more historical analysis. Rosie the Riveter emerged as a symbolic representation of the American women who entered industrial labor. During the Second World War, the United States faced a critical labor shortage after millions of men were drafted into military service, leading to a rapid expansion of female employment in sectors that had previously been dominated by men. The federal government, industrial leaders, and wartime agencies initiated recruitment programs to fill essential positions in aircraft manufacturing, shipbuilding, munitions production, and heavy machinery assembly. These programs were based on the recognition that the nation's industrial output had to increase sharply if the United States intended to sustain military operations on multiple fronts. The image commonly associated with Rosie the Riveter originated from government's campaigns meant to encourage women to join the wartime workforce. Although the poster itself did not carry the name Rosie, it became linked with the character through popular culture and media. The real workforce behind the symbol comprised approximately 6 million American women who took positions in factories and shipyards between 1942 and 1945. Their work included drilling, welding, riveting, machining, assembly, inspection, and maintenance of critical components for aircraft, naval vessels, tanks, artillery, and ammunition. This shift marked one of the largest labor force changes in American economic history. The entry of women into industrial labor was supported by formal training programs created by both government and private manufacturers. These programs provided instruction in tool operation, blueprint reading, safety procedures, and production standards. Companies such as Boeing, Kaiser Shipyards, Ford, and Douglas Aircraft organized large-scale training initiatives to prepare workers for tasks that required mechanical skill and precision. The federal government supplemented these efforts through the War Manpower Commission and the Office of War Information, which coordinated public messaging and labor allocation. Women in wartime manufacturing performed tasks that were essential to sustaining American military operations. Aircraft factories required extensive assembly work, including fuselage construction, engine installation, control surface fabrication, and structural riveting. Shipyards needed workers capable of welding steel plates, installing machinery, and assembling hull components for Liberty ships, destroyer escorts, and landing craft. Munitions plants required labor for the production of small arms, artillery shells, fuses, and explosives. These industries operated on multi-shift schedules, maintaining continuous production to meet the demands of the global conflict. The expansion of the female workforce also required changes in workplace organization. Factories introduced modified equipment, improved safety features, and new uniform standards designed to accommodate female workers. Management practices adapted to the presence of a mixed-gender labor force, emphasizing standardized training and procedural compliance. Production facilities reorganized assembly lines to increase efficiency, often assigning tasks according to skill specialization rather than traditional gender roles. This approach accelerated the integration of women into positions that demanded technical competence and operational consistency. Although the Rosie the Riveter symbol depicted a confident and capable worker, the real conditions in wartime industries varied widely. Workers faced long shifts, exposure to noise and vibration, and strict production quotas. Despite these challenges, output levels increased substantially. Aircraft production in the United States multiplied several times between 1942 and 1944. Shipbuilding achieved unprecedented construction rates, with Liberty ships being produced in weeks rather than months. These achievements demonstrated the effectiveness of integrating women into the industrial labor system on a national scale. The emergence of Rosie the Riveter as a national symbol was shaped by the intersection of wartime labor needs, government messaging, and the expansion of mass media. While the image of a factory worker flexing her arm became iconic in later decades, during the war it functioned as one part of a broader recruitment and motivation effort. The name Rosie became popular through a contemporary song and magazine features that highlighted women working in aircraft production plants. These portrayals reinforced the idea that industrial labor was both patriotic and necessary for the war effort. The character served as a unifying representation of women across different industries, regardless of their specific duties or backgrounds. Women who entered wartime employment encountered a labor environment structured around efficiency and output. Many factories operated around the clock, requiring workers to adapt to rotating shifts and demanding schedules. The emphasis on production targets required strict adherence to procedures and technical standards. Supervisors and engineers monitored assembly lines closely to maintain quality and ensure that components met military specifications. Training programs emphasized precision, reliability, and adherence to standardized methods. These practices reduced error rates and improved the consistency of mass production during a period of intense demand. The incorporation of women into heavy industrial work also required adjustments in physical work. Manufacturers introduced tools, jigs, and fixtures that supported tasks requiring strength or repetitive motion. Mechanical aids reduced the physical load on workers while increasing accuracy. Assembly lines were redesigned to distribute tasks evenly and minimize bottlenecks. These structural modifications were not simply accommodations. They improved overall productivity and demonstrated that industrial processes could be adapted effectively to a diverse workforce. The changes also contributed to long-term innovations in plant efficiency. The presence of women in these roles had direct strategic implications. Aircraft manufacturers relied on large numbers of workers to assemble bombers, fighters, and transport aircraft. Each airframe required thousands of rivets, fittings, electrical components, and hydraulic systems. The precision with which these tasks were performed affected safety and performance. Women became skilled in detailed assembly work, including wing construction, control surface installation, and fuselage reinforcement. Their contributions supported the rapid expansion of American airpower during 1943 and 1944, enabling sustained operations in both the European and Pacific theaters. Shipbuilding offered another example of the scale of wartime labor demands. Large shipyards constructed Liberty ships, tankers, escort vessels, and amphibious craft at unprecedented speed. Women worked as welders, burners, electricians, and pipe. Training programs enabled them to perform these tasks with accuracy and consistency. The rapid output of these shipyards supported Allied logistics across the Atlantic and Pacific, contributing to the timely delivery of supplies, equipment, and personnel. The increased capacity of American shipyards also helped offset losses from German submarine operations earlier in the war. The munitions industry relied heavily on female labor as well. Plants producing artillery shells, small arms, ammunition, and explosives required workers who could maintain high levels of concentration and follow strict safety protocols. Women loaded cartridges, assembled fuses, inspected casings, and managed chemical processes. This work was essential for meeting the demands of sustained combat operations. The reliability of munitions produced under these conditions had direct consequences on the battlefield, reinforcing the connection between home front labor and military effectiveness. Despite the importance of their contributions, women in wartime industries faced limitations and inconsistencies in wages and recognition. Compensation often lagged behind that of male workers performing similar tasks. Workplace policies varied between companies, and opportunities for advancement were limited. However, government agencies and labor organizations promoted the idea that wartime employment offered women a chance to develop new skills, increase their economic independence, and contribute directly to national security. Although disparities persisted, the expansion of female labor during the war marked a significant shift in American workforce patterns. By 19, the presence of women in industrial labor had become normalized in many facilities. Employers adapted recruitment strategies to attract additional workers as production demands continued to rise. Posters, films, and newsreels highlighted women's capabilities and emphasized the importance of maintaining output. Rosie the Riveter became a unifying emblem for these efforts, representing not a single person but an entire segment of the workforce, whose contributions were essential to sustaining the war effort. As wartime production expanded, the role of women in specialized technical positions increased. Many factories introduced advanced processes that required precise measurement, instrument reading, and adherence to engineering specifications. Women were trained to operate drill presses, milling machines, lathes, and precision tools used for fabricating components of aircraft engines, landing gear assemblies, and structural supports. Quality control units relied heavily on female inspectors, who verified component tolerances, checked weld integrity, and examined finished assemblies for defects. Their work contributed directly to the reliability and safety of equipment deployed across multiple theaters of war. The federal government also organized nationwide campaigns to maintain labor stability. Agencies produced instructional films, demonstrating workplace procedures, safety standards, and the purpose of various industrial tasks. These films aimed to accelerate training and ensure uniformity across geographically dispersed facilities. Women entering the workforce received instruction in mechanical principles, blueprint interpretation, and standardized assembly sequences. The consistency produced by these training programs supported the mass production model that defined American wartime industry. This standardization was crucial for maintaining output as factories accelerated production to meet military requirements. Women's participation extended beyond heavy manufacturing into logistics, communications, and administrative functions that supported industrial output. They worked in supply depots, inventory management, and transportation coordination. These roles ensured the steady flow of raw materials, tools, and components to assembly lines. Transportation units employed women as dispatchers and clerks responsible for scheduling deliveries and monitoring supply routes. Their contributions helped reduce bottlenecks and maintained the efficiency needed to achieve high-volume production during peak wartime demand. Industrial plants implemented new methods for evaluating workforce performance. Engineers used high-motion studies, workflow diagrams, and output tracking to measure productivity. These systems identified tasks where additional labor or mechanical aids were required. The inclusion of women in these analyses allowed factories to optimize processes based on real operational data rather than assumptions about traditional labor divisions. This analytical approach contributed to significant increases in overall efficiency and provided a foundation for post-war industrial development. Workplace safety remained a priority due to the demanding nature of many tasks. Factories introduced protective equipment, standardized clothing, and safety protocols tailored to industrial environments. Tools were modified to reduce risk, and assembly lines incorporated guards, fixtures, and mechanical supports. Supervisors enforced strict compliance with safety procedures, especially in munitions plants, where exposure to chemicals and explosives required heightened precautions. These measures reduced accident rates and supported sustained production across long shift cycles. The emphasis on safety reinforced the seriousness of women's roles in maintaining national industrial capacity. The wartime integration of women into industrial labor also influenced broader labor relations. Unions representing industrial workers expanded membership to include women and advocated for standardized wages and working conditions. Although wage disparities persisted, union involvement contributed to improvements in compensation and workplace protections. Government agencies monitored labor disputes to prevent disruptions that could affect wartime production. As a result, the collaboration between labor organizations, management, and federal authorities produced a labor environment focused on stability and output during a critical period. By the later stages of the war, Rosie the Riveter had evolved from a recruitment symbol into a representation of the essential contributions of women to the American war effort. The scale of their involvement demonstrated that industrial labor requirements could not be met solely through traditional workforce demographics. Women proved capable of performing tasks that required technical skill, precision, and physical endurance. Their participation helped sustain the industrial output that supported military operations in Europe, the Pacific, and other theaters. The maintenance of this industrial capacity contributed significantly to the strategic advantage the United States held during the final phases of the conflict. As the war progressed into 1944 and 1945, the integration of women into industrial labor had become a structural element of the American war economy. Production facilities relied on them not as temporary substitutes, but as essential components of operational capacity. Aircraft plants continued to expand output, producing heavy bombers, transport aircraft, and advanced fighter models required for operations in both major theaters. Women participated in nearly every stage of the production process, including subassembly fabrication, electrical wiring, hydraulic system installation, and final inspection. Their contributions supported the accelerated tempo of Allied air operations during the final phases of the war. Shipbuilding remained a major sector requiring a substantial female workforce. Women comprised a significant portion of welders, electricians, and assembly workers in major coastal shipyards. Their work contributed to the rapid construction of vessels required for amphibious operations, convoy protection, and logistical systems. By 1944, shipyards were launching vessels on a near-continuous schedule, reflecting the efficiency of a workforce that had adapted to complex industrial tasks. The ability of women to perform these responsibilities at scale reinforced their importance within the wartime labor system. The munitions industry also continued to depend heavily on female labor. Ammunition plants operated on strict production schedules to meet the demands of ongoing ground and air operations. Women worked in filling lines, fuse assembly units, inspection divisions, and packaging departments. Each process required adherence to safety procedures and quality standards due to the hazardous nature of many materials. The reliability of supplies delivered to frontline units reflected the consistency and discipline maintained within these factories. Their work supported major campaigns across Europe and the Pacific by ensuring that ammunition supplies remained uninterrupted. Government agencies monitored labor trends and adjusted recruitment strategies as needed. Posters, public service broadcasts, and industrial newsletters continued to present Rosie the Riveter as a symbol of national unity and industrial responsibility. Although the image was never intended to represent a specific individual, it became widely associated with the millions of women who sustained the manufacturing base. The character served as a model of efficiency, precision, and determination aligned with wartime requirements. This representation helped maintain morale within factories and fostered a sense of purpose across diverse industrial sectors. In many facilities, women filled supervisory and technical positions as they gained experience. Production lines required skilled oversight, and women with strong performance records were promoted to roles involving training, quality management, and section leadership. These advancements reflected the practical demands of wartime production rather than intentional efforts at social reform. Nevertheless, they demonstrated that women could assume responsibilities historically associated with male workers, provided that organizational structures supported consistent training and standardized procedures. Industrial research and engineering groups also documented the effects of workforce diversification on productivity. Reports indicated that the introduction of women into precision-focused tasks contributed to reductions in defect rates and improved assembly reliability. These findings influenced decisions regarding work assignments and provided data-driven justification for maintaining a mixed-gender workforce throughout the war. The practical evidence of women's effectiveness strengthened the operational foundation of industries that had previously relied on uniform labor demographics. By late 1944, industries began preparing for the eventual shift to peacetime production. Government officials analyzed post-war economic projections, estimating that many women would leave industrial jobs once servicemen returned. However, the experience gained during the war demonstrated that women could perform a wide range of technical and industrial duties at scale. The long-term implications of this shift were not immediately visible, but the wartime integration of women into manufacturing established precedents that influenced future labor participation. Rosie the Riveter remained central to public understanding of the home front during this period. Newspapers and magazines published reports on the contributions of women in major manufacturing centers. Photographs of female welders, riveters, and assemblers circulated widely, reinforcing the association between women and wartime production. Although individual workers were not always identified, their collective work represented a significant share of the national industrial effort. Rosie became the symbolic representation of this collective contribution, emphasizing productivity, discipline, and national service. The final year of the war demonstrated the full capacity of the American industrial system. Aircraft production peaked, shipyards achieved record launch rates, and munitions plants maintained consistent output despite the declining availability of some raw materials. Women contributed to this peak performance across all major sectors. Their participation ensured that supply lines remained stable and that the military had access to the equipment necessary for sustained operations. Rosie the Riveter became a lasting emblem of this achievement, representing the operational integration of a workforce that supported the United States' strategic advantage. By the spring of 19, the scale and effectiveness of the American industrial workforce had become one of the decisive factors in the outcome of the war. The participation of women in this system had transformed factories, shipyards, and production lines across the country. Their contributions supported the continuous flow of aircraft, vehicles, weapons, and supplies required for operations in Europe and the Pacific. The symbol of Rosie the Riveter served as a public representation of this transformation, linking individual labor to national strategic objectives. Although the symbol was simplified and stylized, the reality behind it reflected a complex restructuring of the American workforce. As victory approached, government agencies began planning the transition from wartime to peacetime operations. Officials anticipated that returning servicemen would reclaim industrial positions, leading to the reduction of female employment in heavy manufacturing. Many women sought to continue working, but economic and policy decisions frequently directed them toward pre-war labor patterns. Factories shifted production toward consumer goods, and management adjusted workforce levels to meet reduced demand. Despite these changes, the wartime experience demonstrated that women could perform industrial work efficiently and at scale, establishing a precedent that influenced later labor trends. The end of the war also led to the dismantling of certain training and organization structures that had been created, specifically for wartime requirements. However, industrial studies conducted during the conflict remained influential. Engineers and economists documented the effects of standardized training, workflow optimization, and diversified labor forces. These findings informed post-war industrial planning, contributing to improvements in production efficiency and workforce management. The data also provided evidence that women's participation in technical labor could yield measurable operational benefits. Public recognition of women's wartime contributions increased during the immediate post-war years, though it was often symbolic rather than structural. Ceremonies, government publications, and media coverage acknowledged the role of the wartime workforce in securing victory. Rosie the Riveter became a central theme in these narratives, representing both the scale of female participation and the adaptability of the American industrial system. The character appeared in post-war exhibitions, educational materials, and retrospective accounts of the home front. Although simplified, the symbolism provided a lasting framework for understanding women's contributions to the wartime economy. The long-term effects of the wartime labor shift emerged gradually. Some women returned to industrial work during the late 1940s and early 1950s as new economic opportunities developed in aviation, electronics, and manufacturing. Others entered fields related to administration, healthcare, or education. The experience gained during the war contributed to a broader understanding of women's capacity for technical and industrial work. While labor force participation fluctuated in the years immediately following the war, the foundation had been established for expanding roles in subsequent decades. The association between Rosie the Riveter and the broader wartime workforce became increasingly prominent in historical analysis. Researchers studying the American home front identified the integration of women into production as one of the primary reasons the United States maintained superior industrial output. The ability to mobilize a diverse workforce at scale supported the expansion of logistical networks, the construction of military infrastructure, and the rapid deployment of equipment across global theaters. These capabilities contributed directly to the strategic advantages held by the United States during the final phases of the war. In the decades that followed, the symbol of Rosie the Riveter continued to influence public understanding of the home front. Museums, documentaries, and academic studies used the character as a reference point for examining wartime labor dynamics. Although the symbol did not represent a single individual, it provided a framework for discussing the collective contributions of millions of workers. The technical, organizational, and economic characteristics of their labor became central to understanding the scale and complexity of the wartime industrial system. Modern interpretations of Rosie the Riveter emphasize the operational contributions of women rather than the symbolic elements. These accounts detail the technical tasks performed in aircraft assembly, ship construction, and munitions production. They examine the structure of training programs, the efficiency of mass production systems, and the integration of diverse workers into unified industrial processes. This analytical perspective aligns with the documented evidence from production reports, engineering analyses, and workforce studies conducted during and after the war. By the end of the 20th century, Rosie the Riveter had become one of the most recognizable representations of the American home front. The symbol endured because it encapsulated a complex economic and logistical transformation. It represented a workforce that enabled sustained military operations and contributed to the rapid expansion of American industrial power. Although simplified in visual form, Rosie remained an accurate representation of a significant shift in labor participation and industrial capability during a period of global conflict. Rosie the Riveter's historical significance lies in the scale of the contributions she symbolizes. The entry of millions of women into industrial labor supported aircraft production, shipbuilding, munitions manufacturing, and logistical organization. Their work helped sustain the equipment and supply networks that formed the foundation of American military operations. Through this collective effort, the wartime workforce demonstrated the capacity of the United States to mobilize industrial resources on an unprecedented scale. Rosie the Riveter remains the lasting symbol of this achievement.